The scene then cut outside, where a man angrily accused someone of illegally accessing computers. Another man dismissed the protest and told him to shut up. This tactic echoed Yu Bam's earlier orchestration of staged proof and crowd manipulation. A father bent over a fallen object and cursed his luck with his child. He called the younger man Shorty and demanded to know what he wanted. The father asked for forgiveness for making his son behave that way. The son reacted with shock and blurted out "Dad" in protest. Elsewhere, a pink-haired man confirmed he would cancel the reserved texts immediately. He said the plan proceeded as expected and then named one more demand. The terse exchange echoed earlier staged proof and crowd manipulation orchestrations. After earlier staged manipulations tightened their grip, the meeting turned terse and direct. A shadowed man confronted Yu Bam and demanded publication of 3 coins through Bitman. Pink-haired man flinched and warned the group Yu Bam had not disclosed this. The older man scoffed at the notion and questioned how easy publication could be. The shadowed man smiled and promised to erase one of his emails and Bitman's copy, removing evidence. Silence descended on the room as the threat registered across every face. The older man exhaled slowly and tried to steady himself for the next move. The older man summoned a stamp and a brush and called for the paper. He unfolded a handwritten contract and held a brush to indicate signature. He asked someone to stamp the document and clarified it concerned the publishing of their coins. A subordinate slid a prepared sheet forward, and the older man told them to stamp right there. The room watched as the seal was brought down and pressed into red ink. The act turned a discussion into an official step toward publication and left the room quieter and watchful. The older man leaned over the table and mocked others for following the trend. He framed the enterprise as more than small fees and spoke with a satisfied grin. The protagonist watched and thought about cryptocurrency, recalling the internal image of a growing bomb that could not be stopped. He considered how any explosion would strike those who had created it. Silence settled in the room as that thought hung between them. The older man then asked where to place the seal. A subordinate moved forward, answered yes, and prepared the stamp for the final mark. The older man reached for the seal and announced the final act. He raised the carved stamp and said stamping would end everything. The protagonist watched, and the earlier image of an unchecked explosion returned to mind. A subordinate offered the seal and moved to press it. As the stamp descended, the older man halted the motion. He froze mid-press and feigned hesitation, then laughed that he did not want to do it. Silence spread as their chance to seal the decision evaporated. After the older man halted the seal, the room went quiet and expectation snapped. The protagonist stared and asked why events had shifted without warning. The older man then said he had just received an anonymous message and produced a phone for all to see. The screen bluntly declared that the information was fake. The claim undercut their momentum and seeded doubt among the men gathered. Faces tightened and a tremor of anger crossed the protagonist's features. The previous image of an unchecked explosion returned to his mind, and the halted decision felt suddenly unstable. After the older man halted the seal, he leaned back and smiled. The protagonist stepped forward and asked why the decision had shifted without warning. The older man said he had just received an anonymous message and produced his phone. Everyone watched as the screen displayed a terse text declaring the information fake. The message undercut their momentum and seeded doubt across the room. Eyes narrowed and voices fell silent. The protagonist's jaw tightened. The sudden reversal left the men unsettled and unsure how to proceed. An anonymous text had already stalled the meeting and seeded doubt in the room. The protagonist registered the new message with a frozen expression. An older man leered and dismissed the sender as a spy while waving his phone. Voices rose into argument while several men refused to check the message further. The protagonist stepped forward and urged everyone present to inspect the message. The screen displayed blunt lines that called Mencken trash and denied any apology. The older man's face tightened as a voice warned them not to repeat the insult to VIPs. The room held tension and a hardened resolve under watchful eyes. The anonymous text had already stalled the meeting and seeded doubt in the room. The protagonist stepped forward and held up his phone to show the message. A dark voice scoffed that everyone behaved the same and belittled their fees. He asked what would happen if their VIPs actually heard the recording. An older man froze, then realized the remark was recorded and panicked. Onlookers shouted that the protagonist had recorded them and accused a woman of scamming. Another figure barked for silence, while men blamed the short witness for digging his grave. The older man conceded that his information might be false, and the room tightened. The anonymous text had already stalled the meeting and seeded doubt among the attendees. The protagonist had shown his phone, and men argued over the recording's reach. Accusations flew, and the older man froze when he realized the remark was recorded. Tension tightened as one man suggested killing Shorty and seizing the recording to end their problems. A younger man praised the move and called him dad. An informant apologized and said his reserved information was real, then revealed the proof on his phone. The older man examined it and reacted in stunned disbelief. The proof on the informant's phone ruptured the meeting's fragile order and sparked urgent questions. Men at the console demanded to know how the recording existed and whether it was real. Voices overlapped with accusations and stunned silence. One older man laughed uncontrollably, clutching his face while others stared in alarm. A nearby observer furrowed his brow and wondered if the laugher had lost his mind. The sudden laughter sharpened tension and made accusations sound louder. At that moment, a line of suited men filed into the corridor. Their arrival halted the room and froze the next argument. The informant's phone had ruptured the meeting's fragile order and ignited furious questions. Voices overlapped with accusations, and stunned silence spread across the room. An older man erupted into harsh laughter, clutching his face while others watched. He declared he no longer cared and spat a vulgar dismissal at his critics. He then threatened torture to force a reservation cancellation and offered a 30-minute timetable. That claim sharpened the tension as suited men filed into the corridor and halted further protest. The protagonist watched and decided Bikwi had finally lost his mind. The meeting's rupture spilled into the corridor, and the room's tension snapped tighter. A dark leader raised a baton and barked a single command to get him, pointing at a shorter figure in the path. Suited henchmen surged forward shouting death as they closed the distance. One attacker swung a blunt weapon and drove the targeted man to the floor with a heavy impact. Chaos swallowed the corridor as others shouted and scrambled. The protagonist stood back and watched the assault unfold, convinced Bikwi had finally lost control of the scene. The corridor's chaos carried on as suited men froze at an unexpected outcome. One enforcer, Yumsik, collapsed after a single blow and men muttered in disbelief. A junior member demanded reinforcements and questioned the sudden turn of events. Ubayam answered firmly that reinforcements were unnecessary and warned that intervention would trigger an all-out war. He promised to handle matters himself and told his subordinate to execute Plan B. The team absorbed the order with fear and resolve. The protagonist watched from the scuffle's edge. The corridor still echoed with tension after Yumsik collapsed from a single blow. A junior called for reinforcements, while Ubayam refused and ordered Plan B. At a console, the pink-haired man confirmed the order and began working. Two suited men mocked the kneeling donor and swung blades in anger. They shouted die and bore down with raised blades as execution was required. Then the lights went out and the corridor plunged into sudden darkness. Shouts turned into confusion and the men staggered, unable to see properly. The protagonist watched from the edge as shapes shifted in the dark. The corridor remained chaotic after the lights failed and men groped blindly. One man cursed that he could not see and swore aloud. The protagonist stood at the edge and watched shapes shift in the dark. Fingers found a lighter and a small flame flared, casting thin orange light across faces. The brief glow revealed a shirtless figure, and another man staggered toward him. The nearer man asked in a trembling voice if his leader was all right. Confusion and strained voices filled the corridor as the flame gave fleeting clarity. The lights had failed, and men groped in the dark. A small flame revealed a shirtless figure slipping past overturned furniture. One man inspected a desk and found empty space where papers had been. He announced the contract, and the chairman's stamp were gone. Panic spread and voices rose as curses cut the air. A suited man held a lighter and pointed, while another accused Shorty of the theft. Men surged toward the exit on orders to pursue. Leaders barked not to let the contract leave the building. The protagonist watched the chase begin. Men fanned out across the grounds, sprinting down alleys and ordering rapid searches. Suits swept past hedges and gates, while voices barked not to let anything escape. The protagonist crept along a wall and saw exits already blocked by men. He muttered that a blockade had been set as he tried to slip away. Footsteps thundered from behind, and a figure leapt from cover with a raised club. The assailant shouted that he had the protagonist and swung down toward his head. The chase closed in as guards sealed routes, and the protagonist braced for impact. Men closed in as the protagonist tried to flee along the wall and courtyard. One of the pursuers shouted, "There he is," and others answered with a call to seize him. They fanned out quickly and blocked exits, surrounding him from all sides. A voice counted positions, noting 4 in front and 2 at the rear for 6 total. The assailant raised a club and swung toward the protagonist's head with brutal intent. The strike landed and momentum faltered when a voice cut through the din. A voice shouted, "That's enough," and the attackers froze, held back by the command. The protagonist staggered but was not finished as the group regained composure. Men closed in on the protagonist along the wall and through the courtyard. The pursuers fanned out and sealed the exits. One assailant counted positions, then brought a club down onto the protagonist's head. The blow connected and sent him tumbling down a flight of steps while he cried out. Attackers swarmed him as a shouted order that had briefly halted them earlier faded. The group recovered and pressed the assault. One man leapt and struck again as the protagonist tried to rise. He fell and crawled forward while voices shouted, "There he is," and gave chase. After the attackers had sealed the exits and struck him down, the protagonist counted silently and steeled himself for more. He promised 4 more hits, then surged up and struck from a crouch, taking one assailant down. The pursuers staggered and shouted as others rushed forward. 2 men declared he was down, while a large newcomer with bright hair stepped forward. The newcomer was announced as the foreign Lil Giant. He moved in with his men and shifted the momentum in the courtyard. After the attackers sealed exits and the protagonist struck one assailant down, momentum had shifted as reinforcements arrived. A newcomer announced himself as the foreign Lil Giant and strode into the courtyard. He measured 210 cm. Intelligence named him Bequie's foreign mercenary. He was an American who had tried to be a rapper. He had fled to Korea after killing someone. Prior intelligence labeled him Danger Level A. The protagonist stepped back and said he did not want this meeting. The foreign Lil Giant roared the gang chant and lunged forward to attack. After the foreign Lil Giant lunged, he collapsed under a single precise strike. 2 suited men froze in visible shock at the outcome. Bayam stepped forward and scanned the fallen man. He called to Steve and knelt to check for signs of life. Steve did not respond immediately. Voices rose questioning why the leader had come. The leader stood unbowed and faced the rebuke. He had ignored the explicit order not to come. The courtyard bristled with tension as every group awaited the next move. After the foreign Lil Giant lunged, he collapsed under a single precise strike. 2 suited men froze in shock while Bayam stepped forward, called to Steve, and knelt to check for signs of life. Voices warned the act could cause war, but one man dismissed the danger, saying he was alone and claiming brotherhood. Another could not simply watch and silently thought he had never agreed to this. Footsteps and hurried running followed. A leader told Bayam to get the contract and follow him as they prepared to break through. After the leader ordered movement, a rainbow-haired mercenary charged down the slope shouting, "Gang, gang." The panel labeled him Foreign Lil Giant and listed his height and origin. Prior investigative files broadly classified him as Danger Level A by authorities. He lunged directly at Steve with a wild open attack across the field. Steve did not shout and made no frantic motion to evade the strike. His face fell into shadow as a caption named him one's best fighter and noted his danger rating. The scene stiffened as onlookers braced, while dust and footsteps filled the air. When the leader signaled movement, a rainbow-haired mercenary barreled down the slope shouting, "Gang, gang." A caption identified him as Foreign Lil Giant and noted his danger rating by authorities. He lunged directly at Steve with a wild strike across the field. Steve made no shout and showed no frantic motion to evade the blow. An onlooker confessed they had never imagined calling her reliable. Reinforcements poured in as men ran across the yard shouting, "Let's go, brother." Dust and bodies filled the ground while fighters pressed both flanks. A final caption credited Leader Steve for the timely reinforcement. He had escaped Beekwee's area and put distance between himself and the conflict. Later, negotiations resumed at Bitmain's headquarters beneath the corporate sign. Representatives of One and Bitmain met in the lobby and faced one another across the fountain. One introduced an audio recording and compiled documents as proof and leverage. The materials shifted the balance of power and increased pressure on Bitmain's leaders. Beekwee stepped forward and publicly surrendered, calling out Shorty as he yielded. The surrender secured One's 3 coins and prompted official publication under the Bitmain name. He had left Beekwee's domain and kept his distance from the earlier conflict. Negotiations resumed beneath the Bitmain sign. One's team submitted audio recordings and compiled documents as leverage. Bitmain published the coins under its name. Insiders bought before publication and hyped retail buyers to purchase. They sold immediately after listing to secure massive capital gains. The retail investors called apes suffered heavy losses. The protagonist stood alone in the dim conference room watching the collapsing chart. A sudden hand tightened on fabric near his shoulder. The page ended with a stark caption that read the next day. He left Beekwee's domain and watched markets collapse after the coin's rapid listing and dump. One's team used recordings and documents to gain leverage, while insiders hyped retail buyers then sold. The protagonist stood alone in a dim conference room watching the chart until a hand gripped his shoulder. The next day he walked down a silent corridor toward a lit office and a phone screen. The message on the screen stated the information was fake and set off alarm. The speaker confessed to lying to Steve as a deliberate test to catch spies. They did not expect the lie to leak so quickly to Beekwee and compromise everything. He had left Beekwee's domain and watched markets collapse after the coin's listing and dump. One's team had used recordings and documents to gain leverage, while insiders hyped retail buyers then sold. The protagonist watched a phone screen in a quiet corridor. The phone played a secret recording captured on the third team leader's camera. The clip covered 2120 to 2122 and showed figures near the consoles. One person made a clear texting gesture. The phone holder froze on that frame and concluded the woman seen was the leak. The timing matched the earlier false tip and confirmed rapid leakage. He left Beekwee's domain and watched the coin's listing trigger a market collapse. One's team then used recordings and documents to build leverage over insiders. A secret clip from the third team leader played on a phone in a dark corridor. The phone holder froze a frame that showed a woman making a clear texting gesture. The timing matched the false tip and confirmed rapid leakage from inside the operation. In the close view, the phone holder leaned forward, his face half-shadowed and a small smile forming. He hissed the word spy, and the accusation landed on the protagonist.